What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. This will be previewing the Travelers Championship this week, post U.S. Open. But we are going to recap the U.S. Open really quickly, and then we'll dive into the golf course using the Fantasy Golf Bag Course Preview Pro, and also looking at a couple of the IQ tools, how they can help you this week with the unique golf course transition from the last couple of events with much different tee shots, much different approach shots. So obviously throwing out a bunch of the bad data over the last month or so and trying to pinpoint the guys that are actually playing well in the areas we are most concerned with this week for the Travelers Championship. So with that being said, we'll just dive into it. This is typically a good preview show to kind of get your feet wet for the week. Typically, I don't go back and look at the prior week's tournament, but figured for a U.S. Open, we might as well do it really quickly. So this is the main tournament summary page at Fantasy Golf Bag. So you can see the leaderboard, the ownership for all the players, their odds, DK price, etc. You can see the optimal lineup down here that I tweeted out earlier today, which is pretty funny. 43,000. We got highest price guy being 8,500, Victor Hovland, and then you got Hatton, Sam Burns in the 7Ks, and then JJ Spahn, Robert McIntyre at 6,700, Carlos Ortiz at 6,400. So very low scoring event, obviously, with a low total. JJ Spahn only scored 92.5 points. You know, you can see that in all of our projections that the mean projection for like Scotty was, I think, probably right around 65, to be honest. You probably hit the exact number in all the simulations that we ran, but most players are going to score 50 points, 40 points after they made the cut. So pretty much in line with that. Now you can see we would go back and look at the lead-in stats if we were playing Oakmont next year. But you can see, off the tee wasn't a really big decider. There was a few guys that gained quite a bit off the tee. Rory being number one, Chris Goddard, but wasn't the be-all. Strokes gained approach. We can look at that really quick. A little bit better. Generally, approach is pretty correlated with the finish position, assuming the guy can putt a little bit, which Colin could not, who ranked 155 out of 156 players. Carlos Ortiz, Sam Burns finished in the top 10, Tyrrell Hatton as well, all good on approach. So you do have the spectrum data, which is pretty nice. You can go look at actual spectrum off the tee and see who did it. What I like to do, it's just interesting. Since we do all of our own simulations and calculations for all the data. So Spectrum has a special calculation, obviously, without going much into detail there. You can see who should have won considering our refined metrics with Spectrum. So Sam Burns would have won. Scotty would have finished second. Victor Hovland would have finished third, which he did. And then Cameron Young would have finished fourth, which he did. James Nicholas would have moved way up, which is interesting to see. He's the biggest outlier there. Then Xander, Ryan Fox, Russell Henley, all in all, mostly pretty similar. The biggest jumps are really James Nicholas, which was a huge one. Siwoo Kim, who finished T42. We have him, 12th in the field. And that's pretty much it. All these other guys are pretty much in line with Spectrum total. Mackenzie Hughes is up a little bit, but nothing crazy. So, yeah, the winner in a perfect world, Sam Burns would have won, and Scotty would have finished second by 2 shots. That would have been a perfect situation if golf was fair. You can also see driving distance, not overly correlated. We got Riki, don't even know who that is, was up there with Bryson, which is pretty interesting. 334, Bryson, 328 for Ricky Kawamoto. Rory was up there, T19. Driving distance, honestly, didn't do too much for these guys. Driving accuracy, probably better considering the rough. Let's take a quick peek at that. Mixed bag. I think it all falls back on approach. Aaron Rye, Laurie Cantor, Grillo did okay. Thomas Dietrich, Patrick Reed, Colin Morikawa, decent. Nothing crazy. That's not super indicative. Green regulation definitely going to be up there with Strokes Gained Approach or Spectrum Approach, Carlos Ortiz, Victor Hovland, John Rahm, Victor Perez. So honestly, the biggest takeaway for me was the live guys, good and bad. Obviously, Bryson missing the cut at 40% ownership in the Millie Maker was not ideal. I think the fade from a salary perspective on Scheffler made a lot of sense, and I honestly think it worked out. The guy that won the Millie had Scotty in there, but obviously it wasn't the optimal lineup. Doesn't matter. The guy made $1 million with Scotty. But the truth be told, honestly, when you got 14,000 as a salary, 14,004, the salary becomes quite constrained quickly when you play him. So I think in those situations, considering the optimal lineup had so many cheap guys, this really worked out well where none of the other studs were really up top. Like John Rahm kind of made a run. Xander was really never in it. He just had a decent weekend. Rory was never in it until Sunday. He wasn't in it. He just had a decent finish. T19, he was looking like, finishing 50th until Sunday. But with the way the salaries shook out and none of these guys played well. Look at this big group of missed cuts. Aberg, Cantley, Justin Thomas, Tommy Fleetwood, Joaquin Niemann. So it was a perfect storm for playing Scotty and then having to play the cheap guys, which I personally didn't think on that type of golf course would have been a great strategy. And it obviously was not a great strategy. It just is what it is. So, Scotty 35% owned, Bryson 37% owned across all the contests. This is not just Millie Maker ownership. This is high stakes, low stakes, and mid stakes ownership, just getting an average look at it. But that's the biggest takeaway. I think Scotty, when you pair him, you immediately have to go play a bunch of the cheap guys, and the cheap guys did quite well when you look at the final optimal lineup with 3 guys in the 6Ks and Sam Burns down there at 7,100 who was playing great. Pretty, not easy, but it's much easier to fall into that lineup when you start with Scotty Scheffler. If you play the other route, which is what I did, so it was not a great week, it was playing down from Scotty, didn't play Rory, played way too much Bryson, played not too much Rahm, but probably more than I should have. And then all these guys that I could fit in with that build, Niemann, Fleetwood, Patrick Cantley, and Aberg, all missed the cut. So it was just basically complete shit. So it is what it is. It's golf and it happens. But that is a look at the leaderboard from the U.S. Open. So I wanted to quickly recap there. Congrats to JJ Spawn, who, of course, is a weekly listener to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. So I think JJ Spawn's played pretty well all year, and this is somewhat deserving. My take was, at least going into the weekend, so we bet him on Friday night going into the weekend, which he didn't have great odds. I think it was 10-1. But as good as he's played all year, and if you think about what he did at the Players' Championship with being in contention on a big event, arguably similar to a major championship and what's at stake, I think that was something he could kind of lean on and go back to his experience at the Players' Championship and have something to kind of know he's been there before. He can kind of close it out and get across the finish line. So, congrats to JJ Spawn on winning the U.S. Open. Now we can shift our focus to the Travelers Championship. As always, if you guys have questions, you can drop a comment or you can, message me in the Discord, the Fantasy Golf Bag Discord. I'm always available. So, Travelers Championship this week at TPC River Highlands. Let's jump into the course preview pro and see what we can make of it. So obviously much different. We'll talk about some of the IQ tools here in a second. I won't get into the lineup IQ and the sims today. My goal is to just highlight the golf course because it is very different than what we saw the last few weeks at the U.S. Open, at Memorial, in Canada. It's much different, obviously. It's shorter, many more birdies going to be made, lower scoring overall. So it is a signature event, so there won't be a cut. I don't think there's a cut. It is a signature event. They've randomly cut some of them. I have to double check on the cut line if they do a cut this week. I don't think they do. But yeah, TPC River Highlands, the last 5 winners: Scotty Scheffler 22 under par, Keegan Bradley 23 under par, Xander Schauffele 19, Harris English 13, and Dustin Johnson 19 in 2020. I guess I didn't even finish my thought. So we're gonna look at like the driving IQ and approach IQ, because like I said, it's when you look at all the data for the players and you compare what they've been playing to what they're going to go face at a new golf course, and this isn't new, but a new style of golf course than what they've had the last couple of weeks. It definitely makes sense to figure out what data can be thrown out and is basically not useful. So a bunch of 250 yard or 225 to 250 and 200 to 225 isn't going to be as relevant as it would be at Oakmont or at Memorial as it is at TPC River Highlands. So why would you use it? So let's dive into kind of the ins and outs of TPC River Highlands and kind of what makes it so easy. Course par 70, yardage is 68.35. Got the greens at POA, about 12 on the stimp mirror, which is average, maybe even on the slower side of what PGA Tour players of the PGA Tour events have every week. You can see the hole by hole breakdown. So obviously a lot of these holes are going to play under par. Nothing too noteworthy. The two par fives play the most under par, hole 6 and hole 13. All the other par fours are pretty much slightly under par or slightly over par. There's really not a really difficult hole on this golf course. Hole 4 is the hardest over the last 10 years. 481, plays 0.15 shots over par. Not too bad. Scoring average of what? 69.26. So generally pretty easy. Average par 3, 188. Average par 4, 415, very short for the PGA Tour standards. And average par 5 of those two is 548. I can tell you really quickly. 6 is 574 and 13 is 523. So yeah, very short for the PGA Tour standards. Par 3 is probably a little bit different. Yeah, hole 5 is 223 on average. I shouldn't say on average. On the scorecard, they obviously move it up on different days. 202 at hole 8. Hole 16, or I'm sorry, hole 11, 158, so a little bit shorter, and hole 16, 171. Those are like the hardest holes on the golf course, really. Those 4 play just slightly over par. I think 0.07 over par, if I'm quick mathing that right. So diving into like specific stats on the golf course, and then we'll get into some of the IQ tools and who stands out the most. Average winning score, 17 under par. We talked about that. Average driving distance, 293. We'll get into the specific driving buckets here in just a second as well. Missed fairway penalty is actually pretty high, 0.4, which is quite interesting. Driving accuracy is up, so it doesn't come into play as much. But I think from a scoring perspective, when you see guys, an average score of 1 under par for the field per round, the big draw for missed fairway penalty is 1, they're not making as many birdies. 2, for like a difficult golf course, obviously they're making more bogeys, so it's relative. But I think on a golf course like this, the missed fairway penalty is high because guys aren't going to make as many birdies. So definitely keep an eye on that because, a slightly higher driving accuracy, driving distance down, driving accuracy is actually fairly important. If guys are not hitting enough fairways to keep up with the field, they're going to be falling back. They're not going to have as many birdie looks. It's going to be, a big difference maker for this type of golf course, even though it's low scoring. So keep that in mind. A guy could shoot 2 under par a day and he's still going to fall back 10 shots off the lead. So distance penalty is down. Obviously, a lot of shorter drives, which we'll look at here in just a second. So distance penalty is not a big deal. I would definitely lean more into driving accuracy if we quickly kind of summarize driving as a whole. Left rough and right rough, you can see it there. I won't get into too much details on that. Proximity to the hole is down just slightly, nothing notable. Green regulation is up, makes sense. It's a shorter golf course. Guys are hitting more greens. They got shorter clubs in, a lot shorter clubs in than they've seen the last couple weeks. You can see the missed green regulation penalty is about tour average, so nothing crazy there as far as scrambling goes. Green regulation from the fairway is up, and so is it from the rough. So like those two kind of go hand in hand with the missed fairway penalty. So when you see the green and regulation is up in the rough and the fairway, I think that just goes back to my point on birdies. If the guys aren't able to hit enough fairways, then they're not going to have as many birdie opportunities as the field or at least the top 10 or top 20 guys that finish. that's a big difference maker. So yeah, green and regulation is definitely easier across the board, but to make a bunch of birdies, to hit it close and make those putts, hitting in the fairway, and then proximity is kind of name of the game this week. Scrambling is down slightly. It's about tour average. Birdie or better, tour average. Bogey or worse, just under tour average. Nothing crazy. So to summarize those, it's really looking at driving numbers. We get into approach here in just a second. But yeah, if you could really get down to the nuts and bolts of it, if guys aren't driving it well, at least in play with less than driver, they're not going to keep up with the birdies, generally speaking. This is the course comparison. So this goes a look across the golf course, driving and approach, and also the strokes gained by finish position. So we can quickly look at that and just see if, again, this does not indicate lead-in form. It's just strictly at the golf course, which can be misleading. But you can see, off the tee, not much to be gained. Makes sense. You can't really bomb it. There's no advantage from a distance perspective. Approach is a little bit of a bump. Around the green, not really. And then putting. That's probably the biggest difference. So, I would say if you boil this down, obviously you have to hit some decent tee shots. Approach has to be above average. And then a putting has to be way above average to win or finish in the top 10. Even top 25 is gaining. 2.8 shots putting. If you pull in the winner, you can see that spread goes even further. There's actually a little bit bigger bump off the tee for the winner, but we're talking one guy a year versus looking at the top 10 and top 25. So yeah, approach and, hate to say it, putting is the name of the game at TPC River Highlands. All right, let's dive into driving distance. So obviously this is pretty important for us every week. And then also the approach distance distribution, which most people are pretty in tune with, but the driving distance definitely makes a difference. So, looking at the driving distance number being down 293.1 doesn't really matter. I mean, that's similar to what Bay Hill is, and Bay Hill is extremely, extremely long. So just the driving distance number doesn't tell you really anything about the golf course. So that is the purpose of this distribution. So you can see most tee shots are going to be 290 to 310. That's a basic driver for the field. That's six holes there. Hole 1, hole 3, hole 4, hole 6, hole 7, and hole 18. 270 to 290 is 5. So a pretty solid chunk in that bucket there. You can see the driving distance numbers right there around 280, a couple of 280, one on the low side of 271, and then a couple closer to 290. So you could probably almost bucket 2 of those into the 290 to 310, and that turns into 8 tee shots. So we'll leave it at 5, obviously, but there is 2 tee shots that's borderline on the 290 number. And then 250 to 270, some layup holes, basically 3 woods for some guys, hybrids or irons. You got 258. We got 3 tee shots. 258 on hole 2, 268 on hole 9, and hole 17 is 260. So what do we do with that? Yeah, basically, when you're looking at strokes gained off the tee or spectrum off the tee, which is what we have at Fantasy Golf Bag, throwing out the data that's less relevant. So if I just pulled strokes gained off the tee from the last couple of events, it's going to be a bunch of 290 to 310, which is fine, and a bunch of 310 to 330, which is not relevant at all. Not nearly enough 270 to 290 or 250 to 270. So we would go back, the last 3 months, see what the sample size is to focus just on, filtering down our strokes gained off the tee or spectrum off the tee for those specific buckets and allocations for the week. And that gives us a pretty good indication of who's driving it the best for these specific types of holes. Approach distance distribution, there's still a good sum over 200. You think about the 2 par 3s and the par 5s. So that's 28.4% of approach shots, hardly any 175 to 200. So you could pretty much throw that out. We got 8%. 150 to 175 is pretty big, as is 125 to 150 and 50 to 125. So if you think through the long par 3s and the par 5s, 200 plus, take those out. The entire golf course pretty much is made up of wedge shots around 100 yards, and 125 to 150 and 150 to 175. So basically short irons, wedges, and mid irons is pretty much the name of the game here. This is the past winners and lead-in stats. So the time machine we have, you could go through top 10, top 25, or the entire field and look at lead-in form back at that event or any event for the last 10 years. This just shows you the winner. So obviously it's a pretty good quick look at it, but definitely not all inclusive of top 10 finishers or top 25 finishers or top 5 finishers. But this gives you a good idea, honestly, over the last couple of years, back through 2017. 2016 was kind of weird, and 2015 with Bubba wasn't terrible, but he had a weird trend of losing strokes putting, which most guys were not. There's a few in there. DJ was losing half a shot. Bubba continues to lose strokes putting. Everybody else was putting pretty well leading into this event. Off the tee was pretty strong in every single year. Kind of can throw out Russell Knox here. And then approach was kind of in the same boat. Keegan's a really good ball striker, so I'm not sure the year he won what was going on with him struggling a little bit leading into that event. But you can see all in all, every single winner going back basically through 2017, gaining off the tee, gaining on approach, gaining putting. You can look at the other stats too. Green regulation, all green, proximity green, birdie or better, bogey or worse. So really just the best form leading into this event carries over quite well, even though it's kind of a luck box putting contest in a sense. But they are pure green. So like these guys are all pretty good. If they have enough opportunities and they can make a couple, they'll be just fine. So that is the quick snapshot of the winners, which I find pretty useful. Obviously the time machine's helpful because I can go quickly look at the top 10 and see an overall look. But yeah, it is nice to see a birdie fest where ball striking is somewhat predictive. It's not just the American Express or something. I think I've used that the last couple of weeks. All right, field history. We can quickly look at guys with the best finishes. So as far as tournament winners, we got Scotty, Xander, Keegan, Jordan Spieth, Harris English in the field. As far as top 10 finishes, so we can look at who has the most top 10 finishes. Brian Harmon with 7 top 10 finishes. JT and Keegan with 3 top 10 finishes. Scotty, Patrick Cantley, Harris English, Daniel Berger, Jason Day with 2 top 10 finishes. Cantley's interesting because he's played this event so well through the years. I think he shot 60 here back in 2011. I want to say 2010 maybe. So he's obviously had a really good track record here, but it's somewhat mediocre. I think in a full field, you would look at this and say, wow, that's really good. But when you got the best players coming back here in a really strong field, this is an interesting. I mean, there's players now with better course history than Patrick Cantley. He just has a pretty good string of top 15s since 2018. But I mean, Brian Harmon, he's got 6 top 10s in the last 7 years. Pretty good. JT with some good finishes. Keegan kind of all over the place. We can also see who had the most missed cuts when it had a cut. These are the guys that probably are, if you want to boil down the course history to like just straight good and bad, this would probably be the best indicator of bad. You got JT Poston with 5 missed cuts. This was way back when. So like some of these guys have gotten better. So I would always kind of caution some of these, especially the younger guys that have improved, which JT Poston has. He has a bunch of missed cuts in a T2 and 22, so somewhat all over the place. Michael Kim has struggled here. Max Homa struggled here. Siwoo Kim has mostly struggled here. Nick Taylor, not the best. Lucas Glover and Adam Hadwin. Yeah, those are probably the worst players you could quickly take a quick eyeball at and then maybe throw them out right off the bat. And then, is there anybody with no missed cuts? Yeah, Rory. Rory has 5 events, no missed cuts. Pretty good. Victor has 4 no missed cuts. Sungjae has 4 no missed cuts. You got Adam Scott, Austin Eckroat with 2, Aberg with 2. Not great finishes, but no miscuts. So different ways you can look at it. And that is the quick and dirty way to see. I shouldn't even say dirty. It's a quick way to glance through the course history and see like who stands out good and bad. Because obviously more goes into it than just who has good finishes. Brian Harman, there's probably a reason. So we can dive into that. Then you could look at the past leaderboards, specific stats, etc. I'm not going to get into all that. So let's jump right into driving IQ, because I think that is an interesting discussion this week, because obviously most people, their first intent is to throw away any mention of driving accuracy or driving distance as a whole, which is generally fine. You throw in, off the tee as a nice catch-all of both driving accuracy from a penalty standpoint. If it's driving accuracy that's bad on a very easy golf course, it may not be as detrimental. If it's driving accuracy like at Oakmont or at Bay Hill, then yeah, it's going to be much worse. So we can look at the last 12 events. It's about 3 months of data. It includes the alternate field events, which have Shotling, which is nice. 290 to 310, 270 to 290, 250 to 270. I'm not going to mess with missed fairway penalty or distance penalty, but I do want to take out driving distance since that's not relevant. I think driving accuracy and just strokes gained off the tee is probably the best indicator this week. So I'll quickly run a weighted model. Let's see what we want to do. So we kind of got an idea. We had 6 and 5. So let's just do like 40%, 290 to 310. Let's do 35%, 270 to 290. And I think that's going to be too high on the 250 to 270. Yeah, we'll bump up 290 to 310 to 45. So we got basically a breakout, pretty flat drop off. 290 to 310, 45% weight, 35% weight to 270, 290, and then the remaining 20% to 250 to 270. Pretty simple. As far as the two stats we had baked in here, we could take one completely out. Off the tee, we'll keep it pretty high. So let's just do 65%. And then we'll do 35% for the driving accuracy. So it gives it a little bit of a bump. Like obviously off the tee includes accuracy and distance. And now we're just giving a little bump to the relative driving accuracy. So again, that's against the field. And then this just summarizes it. So models emphasizing 290 to 310 and strokes gained off the tee. Just a quick look at it. And what does that show us from a driving perspective? And I'll do percentiles, which is my preferred method. You can see Sungjae M leads the way. Pretty good sample size. I would say 250 to 270 is a little bit low. Not terrible. We're talking like 20 tee shots in that group. 270, 290 is much higher, and 290, 310 is even higher. And that just goes to the last few events being focused in those buckets, which goes back to my initial point of looking at strokes gained off the tee would incorporate most of these larger buckets of 290 to 310 from the last few events, and you're not getting enough 250 to 270, or you're just weighting it improperly. So it's heavily weighted towards the 290 to 310, and you wouldn't get any of the 270, 290, or 250 to 270. So this gives you a pretty good look. Scotty is 4th. Colin Morikawa is 5th. I think they're going to be pretty popular this week. Scotty gets a bump down in price. Smaller player pool. I think the pricing is down to 6K and not 5K, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So just looking through the top guys for those listening, and if you're watching, this is obviously a little bit easier. Sungjae M leads the way. Daniel Berger, Kevin Yu, Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, who's a bit risky this week after WDing on Sunday at the U.S. Open. So a little bit concerning there as far as his risk goes. He might WD beforehand, or he's just not 100%. So we'll see. I mean, that's injuries in golf are tricky because they don't give us enough information. He could be trying out rehabbing it today and tomorrow, test it out Wednesday, and then test it out Thursday morning and withdraw late Thursday, and just, screws the 8% of people that wanted to give it a shot. So you'll get a discount in his ownership, but definitely try to stay up to date with whatever is going on with Corey Connors. You got Taylor Pendrith, which is interesting because he's such a good driver. With the longer, the 290 to 310 and even 310 to 330 this last week, he's still pretty good. Even better in the 250 to 270 bucket. Driving accuracy takes a dip down. So again, something to kind of watch out for. That would be something where his driving has been good. The driving accuracy potentially, you could argue, would inhibit his, it would obviously inhibit his proximity, which would lead to less birdies. So, and then the last one there is Maverick McNeely. You got JJ Sponke, Rally kind of filling it out. I do want to just check these guys, and let's just see how many of these guys kind of finish in the top of the approach IQ. So we'll do the whole schema here. Do the same sample of last 12 events. I'll do the combo IQ video this week for the Fantasy Golf Bag members, which is basically combining driving, approach, and then baking in putting, which is a really nice profile piece for any of the events. But obviously this week, baking and putting a little bit is probably going to be helpful to weeding out the Doug Gims of the world, where ball striking looks phenomenal and then they don't do anything. We'll see what Morikawa's. I didn't even look at his spectrum putting, but obviously his strokes gained putting was pretty terrible. Let's do basically every bucket except for 225 to 250. I'm not going to mess with, even though there's one, maybe a couple par fives for some guys get into that bucket, or that one par three, hole 4, whatever it was. We'll look at fairways, par threes, and first cut as always. Just adding some sample size to clean lies. We'll stick with spectrum approach. We do a spectrum for the approach IQ, which is nice. And then we can do a quick weighted model here, looking at each of those. So we try to replicate it off of the actual buckets this week. So we know it was 28%, 200 to 225. So I'll just do 25% as a whole number. 175 to 200 was basically non-existent. So we'll do 5%. It's not moving the needle for anything, but just so I don't have to go take it out, we'll just leave it in at 5%. 20%, we'll bump that up just slightly. Bump this up slightly too. Bump it up slightly. Bump it up slightly. There and there. All right. So let's see how many we get with percentiles in the top that fit the driving build. So we got 2 right off the bat. Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa. Scotty's 1, and he was 4th in the driving model. So grades out well from a statistical standpoint, not just a strokes gained total standpoint, which is what the odds are all kind of based around. Obviously been great ball striking for the last couple of years. And as far as course fit, which is essentially what the IQ tools do, is boils down the statistics for like a course fit profile. Scotty is number 1 for both, or across both. He's number 1. Colin Morikawa is number 2 when you consider both. The other guys that are really good with the approaches specific for this golf course, when you look at the shorter wedges and the mid irons, Ryan Fox, Victor Hovland, Bud Colley, Hideki Matsuyama, Sepp Straka, and Christian Bezadenhout. So that is the easy way to do it. It's interesting because like a guy like Ryan Fox or Bud Colley, like you could go pull up, go run a quick like lead-in form really fast. We'll do the same last 12 events. And if we go down to where Bud Colley is, there's Ryan Fox, Bud Colley, 6,800. I don't want to do that. If we jump down to his round profile, you can kind of see a nice dip off in the last 2 events. So if you think about the longer golf courses, we saw Muirfield Village and Oakmont, not great. Prior to that, Colonial was okay. Quail Hollow was good and bad. Harbor Town was good and bad. His big string of good events was kind of back at TPC San Antonio, which is incorporated into that number. Same with Ryan Fox. If you look at Ryan Fox's numbers, kind of does the same exact thing. A little bit better last week, and obviously good at the Canadian Open. I would say Ryan Fox has been more consistent than Bud Colley. So without getting too much into the weeds for each of these guys, I think that's probably really curious. We go pull. Where did he go? Yeah, none. It'd be interesting to see what people push as far as mapping it entire courses, because like we're just looking like the IQ tools is supposed to defeat this, basically overcome this entirely. So you can see a big difference just in the last 24 events with where did he go? Bud Colley. You know, he's got no rounds. If we just looked at it at round level, no rounds on short golf courses where we could pull from any of that data, which is what the ApproachIQ helps us do, is we just focus in on the shots he has had that kind of represent the golf course we're about to see. I mean, even if we went back 12 months, we're looking at 8. You're going all the way back to Sony, RSM. It's basically it. So, yeah, as far as short golf courses go, this isn't going to be the easiest way to filter it down. I would much rather just go into ApproachIQ, focus in on the driving and driving IQ, and then ApproachIQ obviously pulling the specific buckets that they're going to face this week and getting a better look at it that way. So like Bud Colley, hopefully maybe people ignore Bud Colley or ignore, they probably won't ignore Ryan Fox. He's pretty much on a tear, but that's a good way to do it. Nice and easy. Outside of that, I think that is it, guys. Let's see anything else. Again, the time machine, you can go back and look at each of those events in the top 10 and kind of focus in on who was doing the best. So approach, obviously, going to be pretty big. Off the tees, probably underrated a little bit. So I think that's it, guys. Got Showdown. We'll do Showdown each day this week as well for the EAP data. The lineup IQ will be loaded. It has DraftKings already, and then we'll load it with FanDuel when the FanDuel pricing gets posted. But that'll do it. 37 minutes. All right. As always, you can find me at fantasygolfbag.com. And if you're watching this as a replay on the podcast channel, so Spotify, Apple, etc., or YouTube, please hit the like button, and you can subscribe on YouTube. We got a good group on there already, which is nice. Share it out, retweet, whatever you want to do. Always helps us out. But until later this week, we will, we'll post out the premium content for the Combo IQ and the full article on Wednesday. But until then, guys, best of luck this week. Enjoy researching and coming down from the high of the U.S. Open, which was had pros and cons to it, which we talked about. We won't go back into that detail, but man, they lost the golf course. That was rough on Sunday to watch that, especially with Sam Burns. But best of luck, guys. So it should be a fun event. Should be more fun for DFS and for betting, just to see guys make some birdies again. There's pros and cons to watching guys in a birdie fest, but I think watching your lineups, guys shoot 3, 4, 5, 6 under is a little bit more fun than watching on Showdown, at least for me last week, which was just murder. Minus 3.4 after hole 1. That wasn't very fun. So I think that'll do it, guys. Thanks again for watching. Always appreciate the support, and good luck this week for the Travelers Championship. Stay in touch. We'll talk to you later. Bye.